You're listening to the Australian Water Association podcast series. My name is Jo Taranto, and joining me is Joel Spry. Joel is the Demand Management Coordinator of Minor Centres and Schools for Northern Territory Power Water Corporation. And we're talking today about creating a generational change in regional community attitudes. Welcome, Joel.
Hey, Jo.
Now, you're joining us from Darwin today, and I've heard some beautiful bird noises in the background. Can you tell us a little bit about the challenges that Katherine and the Northern Territory has faced when it comes to drinking water in recent years?
Yeah, we do have some challenges, and Katherine itself has been through some pretty tough times of late. They've had their worst wet season on record, and we will be up against it again this year when it comes to delivering safe drinking water. Katherine has the RAAF base there out at Tyndall, and they, like a few of the other RAF bases around Australia, have had issues with PFAS and groundwater contamination. So that's caused the power and water some issues, or we've had to restrict the amount of water that we can use from the ground to supply to the community.
The Water Demand Management Program, Joel, tell us about that.
Since 2017, Katherine have been on compulsory water conservation measures. The community have been really good in following those measures. It's just basically an odds and evens system and no watering on Fridays. And that is to keep the demand to a level where we don't have to access any of the groundwater. Power and Water have been working with the community, been working with all sectors of the community, actually. We've been working with residents, commercial and all the government sectors as well, with different programs. We run a garden tune-up rebate where residents who have an automated irrigation controller can have someone who's been trained in how to operate those sometimes really tricky things to operate, as well as trained in water efficiency to go to their place and set up their irrigation controllers so that their garden's using the right amount of water, but also that they are adhering to these odds and evens setup as part of the compulsory water conservation measures. We've done other things such as a leak find and fix rebate where we send out probably up to 10 leak checkers. So they go and check every metre in Katherine, physically check it to see if there is a leak. And if there is, they put a little card in the letterbox or tie it on the fence just to say, it looks like you might have a leak. Now you're eligible for a rebate to get a plumber who's been trained again in water efficiency to come out and fix those leaks. We work with the high users to try and reduce the amount of water that they use, and we work pretty closely with the government sectors as well. We try and get them to lead by example.
A major component of the program has been called the Cloud to Cup education program. Can you share what that's involved?
Yeah. All those things that I mentioned before primarily have to do with adults, and targeting adults has been pretty successful, but there's always an opportunity to work with students. There's always an opportunity to work with children, and it's not getting them to do our dirty work, although they do it pretty well because they go home and they pester their parents and say, hey, are you watering on Friday? No. There's no way you should be watering on Friday. Don't you know the rules? That type of thing. But to bring kids along on the journey to help explain to them what's actually going on in Katherine has been a really, really rewarding and important job that we've been a part of over the last 3 years, nearly 3 years now.
So this is a schools-based program primarily?
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. It's the Cloud to Cup. It is just that. It takes the kids on a journey from where their water actually comes from and how it gets to their cup. So we opened it up to all primary schools in Katherine, and 4 out of the 5 said, yep, we're on board. And we work primarily with years 5 to 6. They're the kids that we really like to work with. We can do work with a younger brigade, but the year 5, 6 seems to be the sweet spot, I suppose, when it comes to being able to grasp the concepts and then communicate it to their parents and to whoever's at home.
How important is it when you're designing a program like this to cater for all learning abilities and cultural backgrounds as well?
It is so important. We've been working in the education space in the Northern Territory for a lot of years, but we've had a real focus when it comes to demand management over the last 4 years. And Katherine presents its own unique challenges. Well, for starters, we didn't have an environmental driver to base the school's education program on. The driver was, yep, we've got this groundwater pollution and we need to reduce the amount of water that comes out of there. So, and coming with that, when we first went down there to Katherine to do some presentations to these schools, there was actually a little bit of bullying going on. All the kids who lived on the RAF base out at Tyndall, or RAAF base, when we were doing these presentations, you could hear other kids who didn't live there saying, this is all your fault. What are you doing? This is terrible. It's your fault. And you could see the bullying going on. So there was a role for us to play in stopping that, in getting the right messages out there and to say, hey, your water is actually safe to drink. There's nothing wrong with the water. If we all obey by the new conservation measures, there's going to be no issue. So there was that we had to deal with. But then there's also, in Katherine, there's a high proportion of Indigenous students, and that brings its own challenges, but it's also such a great opportunity to really try a few different models of delivering education programs. So with this one, we designed it so we would examine the traditional water use to make sure that every child within the school had an opportunity to engage with what we were talking about. So if we had have gone, yep, all right, well, this is where your water comes from, it's a treatment plant, it's groundwater, not a lot of kids, especially with around about 70% Indigenous population, probably not going to grasp it as much. But we decided that we would take them to Nipmaluk or Katherine Gorge, where there's a lot of Aboriginal Dreamtime stories and a lot of things are based out there. And to see, we had some rangers, some Aboriginal or Indigenous rangers talk to these kids, and they were just so engaged. It really got them involved. So that was one way that we managed to swing around the way that we delivered things. It was just so important to be able to cater for everybody.
Is that what you mean by a traditional present and pledge approach to engaging your stakeholders?
Yeah, for sure. Stakeholders in this case are the kids, of course. So we took them through the traditional water use, and we heard about how water has been used in Aboriginal culture for tens of thousands of years. And then, so that was a traditional concept of it. The present, so we took them, it's all an interactive tour, I suppose you could describe it as. We took them to the Katherine treatment plant, the water treatment plant there. So they saw where the water was being pumped from the Katherine River and it goes through the big treatment plant, but also where the groundwater was being pumped from, because we still do treat 1 megalitre of water per day in a PFAS treatment plant. So they got to go through this pretty cool, just an amazing display of technology that we walk through. It's basically a shipping container, and it's got all of these different filters and gauges and wiring. It's just a wonderful thing for any sort of kid to walk through. So we took them there and said, right, this is the processes that your water goes through to get to your cup. And so we took them there. And then, as you mentioned before, we did a pledge as well. So we would take them back into the classroom and say, right, well, let's put it all together. We've seen how water's been used traditionally. We've seen how much effort and how much expense and how many people have been used, how many people have been employed to get the water to your cup. Do you think it's a great idea that all this water is still being either leaked through pipes, or when you're brushing your teeth, and the simple example of that, while you've got your tap turned on, do you think that is a good use of that resource? Pretty much everyone said, no, of course not. Let's make a pledge to say, right, we are going to use water better into the future. And that might have been, right, I'm going to have a shorter shower, or I'm going to go and tell mum and dad definitely not to water on Friday because it's just so important. Or it might be something as just as simple as just turning the tap off when I brush my teeth. But it's all very, very important, no matter how big or small a water saving they commit to.
What have the results of the program showed you about its success?
Well, the evaluation side of it is something that I'm really passionate about. I just really think that it's so important because a lot of these education programs that are run with water utilities or anywhere other than schools, pretty much, if funding gets a little bit tight or times get tough, they're generally the first thing that gets cut. And even some of the attitudes that I've heard from other utilities, people saying, "Oh, that's such a nice thing to do. It must be really good working with kids, and you know, must be such a lovely job." And yeah, it is. It's amazing working with the next generation, or the current generation of water users, but the next generation of influencers and community influencers. There is a way that you can say, yeah, it's a great thing to do, to work for, or it's a great thing to work with, but it's also so important. So we measure uh, kids' attitudes and knowledge and awareness before they start any of our education programs, and then we measure it at the end, the change in the end, so that we can tie that up loosely to a reduction in the amount of water that's used, and then we can do some rough calculations to say, yep, well, we spent 35 cents for a reduction of 1 kilolitre, as an example. But so we know what the results are. I'm not saying that that's the most rigorous. I'm sure we can improve when it comes to that. But we had 140 students that directly participated in the Katherine, the Cloud to Cut program. We had 18 teachers as well, and it's really important that the teachers are involved. I'm just really wary that teachers can see our education programs as a bit of a time to babysit, I suppose, or to have a babysitter. Oh, we've got someone coming into the class. Here you go. You can talk about this while I go and do whatever. I mean, they work really hard, but we really want the teachers to be involved in this, and because they are, especially in the smaller communities, they're the leaders in the community as well, so they need to be on board. So we had 18 teachers involved in last year's program. Had some figures like 60% of students said that their family had made changes as a result of being part of the program. So something that the students had gone home and told their families about. Interestingly, from my point of view anyway, 65% of students would now intervene if they saw someone wasting water. Now, I don't know if that's true or not. It could be a little bit of bravado, but it just shows, I think, that the importance of water and the message is getting through.
I imagine it's a program, Joel, that doesn't really ever reach completion. Education's an ongoing thing. What are your next steps?
One of the things that I'm really keen to see over the next few years is that when we teach, or when we put these kids through these programs, that they have the opportunity to pass on what they've learnt to the younger generation. So we work directly with the 5-6s, but as a result, I would love to see, say, these 5-6s, the year 5-6s, work with the grade 2s, for example. A lot of them might have younger brothers or sisters, so they can actually play a role as almost pseudo teachers in the classroom and set it up that way. And we're really keen on the STEM side of things too, because we do get our scientists and we do get our engineers, we do get our mathematicians and everybody else that's involved in the technology of delivering water. We do get them into the classroom. We really want to inspire the next generation of scientists and engineers, particularly.
It's certainly an inspiring and slightly different use of a utility's time, and I think we've been really great to hear about it today, Joel. I've been speaking with Joel Spry, Demand Management Coordinator of Minor Centres and Schools for the Power Water Corporation in the Northern Territory. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Jo. Pleasure.